Welcome to Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. Tonight's program and 14 more that we'll be producing this summer are funded in part by the Oklahoma Foundation for the Humanities. This grant makes it possible for us to travel to remote locations to tape programs and to make copies available through 4 Oklahoma libraries and to buy some items for the set, such as easel and cue cards and so forth. This should make it easier for us to do a better job with the program. I'd like to thank the Oklahoma Foundation for the Humanities for their support. We're still an all-volunteer crew, of course, but this grant will cover some of the expenses of producing and distributing the show. Tonight, our topic is the Caddo language. This is our second show to present the structures of an Oklahoma Indian language in detail. As a linguist, I'm trained in seeing and presenting in an analytical way the grammar or structure of languages. This is not a show about how to teach or learn the Caddo language, and we won't have a Caddo speaker tonight, although we did have a show last year with speaker Randlett Edmonds, and we will do a show later this summer with a Caddo speaker, I hope. Some people are under the impression that Indian languages are simple or primitive languages, that somehow they don't quite measure up to English or to other European languages or world languages. Nothing could be further from the truth. My purpose tonight is to show that Caddo, like all languages, is rich, complex, and fascinating. Before I begin, let me give you a little background on Caddo. Caddo is spoken by a few members of the Caddo tribe, which has its headquarters in Binger, Oklahoma. Speakers live mainly in the area of Binger, Luqueba, Gracemont, Anadarko, and that area in west central Oklahoma. Only 30 people or so, from what I'm told, are still fully fluent in the language, and most of those are over age 60. In fact, I think most are over age 70. Although there have been classes in Gracemont, Oklahoma City, and Binger in the past, as far as I know at present there are no university classes, community classes, tribally sponsored classes, children's activities, or anything going on specifically with the Caddo language. So like so many of the Indian languages in Oklahoma, Caddo is extremely threatened. Caddo belongs to the Caddoan language family, which also includes the Wichita and Pawnee languages. And it used to include the Quechua language, which is now extinct. Caddo is the most divergent language of the group. It's sort of a cousin to Wichita and Pawnee. So Wichita and Pawnee speakers would not be able to understand very much Caddo, although you could see some relationship between their words. English has borrowed at least 2 place names from the Caddo language, Anadarko and Texas. Anadarko means bumblebee place. It was named after one of the Caddo clans. The original name was Nadaku. And Texas means friends. I think this was borrowed first into Spanish and then from Spanish into English, but the original Caddo form was Teisha, which means friend. Caddo itself has borrowed, of course, from other languages as well as most languages have. It's borrowed from Spanish words like huacas, which means cow, and from French words like sunda, which means soldier. In fact, the Caddo name for Fort Cobb is Nasunda, which means soldier place. And it's also borrowed from English. In fact, the word Inkinishi, from the English word English, is the Caddo way of referring to a white person. There are very few opportunities to hear Caddo spoken. But if you want to hear Caddo songs, go to some of the dances at the tribe. There's also a Caddo culture club that I'm not real up to date on this. You might want to contact the tribe for details, but it used to meet every week or two. I think it still meets regularly at the complex in Binger, and you can go there and learn Caddo songs and dances. And as I understand it, they've always welcomed non-Caddos, so if you're not Caddo and would still like to observe or learn some of that, you would be welcome, I think. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty a little bit and talk about the grammar or the structure of the Caddo language. Let's begin by talking about the sounds. These letters here represent the sounds of the Caddo language. There are 22 sounds symbolized here. And you might notice a few things right away. There are a couple of unusual symbols. Some of the sounds are represented by 2 letters, as they are in English. We have CH for the ch sound, for instance. There's a TS for a ts sound. But there are also a number of letters that we use in the English alphabet which are not required to write Caddo because those sounds don't exist. So there's no X and there's no C, just a plain C. There's no L and so forth. So each language has its own sound system, and this alphabet has been devised by linguist Wallace Chafe to represent the sounds of the Caddo language. Wallace Chafe is a linguist at the University of California at Santa Barbara, and to my knowledge, he's the person in the world who knows the most about the Caddo language other than those few remaining fluent speakers. And he's certainly the leading analyst of the language in a scholarly context. So these are the 22 sounds. I'll give you an example for each sound so you get an idea of what they sound like. There are no set names for these letters, and this is not an officially adopted alphabet. This is just a way of writing the Caddo language, which is sensitive to the structure of the language. The letter A is pronounced A, or when it's in a closed syllable, that is followed by a consonant in the same syllable, it's pronounced more like So an example of a word with A's in it would be the word for beans. And this is pronounced dabas. This also has the letter B in it, another word with a B, and the B is very much like the English language B. Another example for B would be banit, which means bird. Moving on to the CH or ch sound, there's a word for scorpion, which sounds like chawat. And that's how that would be spelled, chawat, scorpion. Now we come to one of the unusual sounds of Caddo. So far it's not too difficult, but you'll see that there are several symbols here which are written with an apostrophe diacritical mark here. And these are, this is a series of consonants called glottalized consonants. They have what you might perceive as a little hiccup or a little catch in the voice. So this is pronounced ch, and this is pronounced ch, ch. And an example of a word that begins with that sound is the word for turtle. Turtle would be written like this, and it's pronounced chaya, chaya. So that's a glottalized CH sound. Now going on to D, I'll move over here for an example for D, and that would be dut. And this is the word for rat. Another example with a D would be a very common word, the word for bread, dashkat. Dashkat. Now I'm using some accent marks here occasionally, which I'll explain in a few moments. Let's move on to H. H is very much the same as English H, except that it occurs in more different positions in the word. So and one example with an H would be habashku, which means sour. It literally means sour, but it's also the name for a traditional Caddo stew, a meat stew, habashku. Another word with H, actually this word also illustrates it. What my point is that H can occur on the end of a word. It doesn't in English. We spell words with an H on the end, but you don't really hear that H sound. In Caddo, sometimes you do. So the word for fish is bata. Now, in fact, in Caddo also, you don't always hear that H. It was very hard for me when I first started studying Caddo to distinguish between words that ended in an H and words that ended in, well, another sound, a glottal stop, which I'll talk about in a moment. It's very faint, and sometimes it does drop out at the end of a word, but it's really there. It can be demonstrated that it's really there in the structure of the language. Let me clear off some space here, and we'll move on to I. The letter I, a good word with that would be bit. So you can hear that I is pronounced something like I in Caddo, bit, which is the number 2. And then for K we have kika, which means snake. K is very much like English K. But then we have a K with an apostrophe, very similar to this CH with the apostrophe. Remember I said there's this whole series of consonants which are kind of parallel. They're all written with an apostrophe, and they have that little catch in the voice. So an example of the K, the glottalized K, is the word for liver. Actually, it has a plain K and a glottalized, so it's good because you can see the difference. The word for liver. It's written like this, a plain K and then a glottalized K, and it's pronounced kan-ku. Kan-ku. So the first K is K, the second K is K. Okay, let's move on. We'll start going a little bit faster here now that I hope you're getting the hang of things a little. For an N, the letter N, let's take the word for woman, natti. That's two T's there, natti, woman. Let's go on to P. There's a word for nephew or niece, which is patsi. Patsi. It's nephew or niece. And since I've cited an example with a glottal stop in it, let me jump ahead to this glottal stop. This letter here is called glottal stop, and I'll give you some more examples with that so you can see what that is. This word ends in a glottal stop. I pronounced it pa-tsi. That on the end is the glottal stop. Here's some other examples. The word for prairie dog is du'ut. Du'ut. If this glottal stop were not here, if this were just spelled D-U-U-T, it would be du'ut, very smooth. But you have that little interruption in the middle, du'ut, which is made deep in your throat, and it's called a glottal stop because it's made in your glottis, down in your voice box, or larynx. So that's an example of a glottal stop. It's a letter like any other in Caddo. The way you make this symbol is, it's as if you were making a question mark, but you don't put the dot under it. That's a glottal stop. Here's some other examples. Well, we've already seen, I won't cite this next one because we've already seen one where glottal stop ends the word, pa-tsi. And then let me give you one more. This is a really tough word to pronounce. And even some fluent Caddo speakers don't use this particular sound in this way, but let me show you this example anyway, because some people do pronounce this word this way. Note, oops, I left out a glottal stop. It's, this is a word that means bear, and it's just full of glottal stops. And it's pronounced something like no, see. It actually begins with a combination of a glottal stop and an N, which I'm afraid I probably don't make very well. It's very difficult if you're not used to it. Let's see what other letters we need to exemplify. I think maybe I'll just clean off and go ahead and give you an example of each of the others to make sure we've covered everything, not left out any important points. Most of the letters, other than the glottal stop and those glottalized consonants, are probably familiar to you from English or another language. But we might as well learn a few more words of Caddo while we're at it. So I think we were up to S, which is the example I have for that is the word for silver or money, and it's pronounced suna. Whoops. Suna. And then for SH, it sounds just like an English SH. We have shiwa, which means squirrel. And for T, let's take tasha, which means wolf or coyote. And that's another word that ends in an H. You don't hear it very well sometimes, but I think it's really there. And for the T, for the glottalized T, the T, let's take the word for again, t'ana. Again, whoops. And that just leaves about 4 more letters. Let me clean off again. I've been writing big here. Let's try the TS sound. Now in English we have a TS sound in words like cats. It's usually at the end of a word or in the middle of a word. In Caddo you can also get this TS sound at the beginning of a word. An example would be the word for milk. It has it at the beginning and in the middle. And it would be spelled like this. Tsu, this one ends in a glottal stop. Tsu, 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 tsu. That's the word for milk. Then we have our glottalized TS, tsa, which occurs in the word for possum, tsa, tawin. Possum or opossum if you prefer. And that brings us to U, like in the word, we've seen many U's already, but here's another one in the word for raccoon, which is pronounced ut. And then the word for skunk will illustrate W, and it's pronounced wihit. Some friends of mine came to a Caddo class once, and they had hit a skunk along the way, and as soon as they walked into the room, it was obvious to all of us. And so they came in, and this was Randall Edmonds and another friend, and he immediately made a wonderful bilingual pun. He said, well, we hit, we hit. And that was what was responsible for the smell. Finally, for the letter Y, let's take the word for tobacco, which is yaha. Yaha. Now, I couldn't cite all these examples without bringing in a couple of things that I haven't discussed yet, so let me go back and cover these. One is these accent marks, like this one here. In Caddo, you have to be careful which pitch of your voice you use when you pronounce a word or even a syllable within a word. It's what's called a pitch accent language. And it's important to make your pitch of any one vowel to make the pitch high or low or falling. And this accent here means that the pitch should be higher. And if you have no mark on the vowel, that means it's a low pitch. So this would be tsu, tsu. This one is high and this one is low. Tsu, tsu. If it were reversed, the accent here, it would be tsu, tsu. But instead it's tsu, tsu. So this is high pitch, this is low pitch. And we haven't seen an example yet of the falling pitch. It's rather rare, but it does occur. Let me find an example. Di tama is the word for horse. And you write that with the accent that goes the other way, the grave accent if you've studied French and if you use that term. Di tama. So there are a few words that have this falling accent, like di tama. And then these two vowels are low pitched. So you have all these possibilities of pitch, and it's very important in the language that you reproduce those appropriately, or you may not be understood, or at best you'll have an accent. So if you may have noticed that there are only 1, 2, 3 vowels in the Caddo language. That's all you need. And a whole bunch of consonants, some of them pretty interesting. Another thing I haven't mentioned is this thing of writing 2 vowels the same in a row. We have the example down here in tobacco, yaha, and tsatawin. There's a long A there, and a long U in tsu, tsu. And also in di, tama. So vowels can be long or short, and by long I just mean that you hold on to them longer. See, this word for milk has 1 long U and 1 short U, so this is tsu, tsu. This one's long and this one's short, and you can do that with any of the vowels, any of the 3 vowels. So going back to our original examples of the borrowings from Caddo into English, I was telling you that Anadarko and Texas have their origin in the Caddo language. I'll show you how those would be spelled in this system of writing Caddo. Let's see, Anadarko means bumblebee place. The part that means place is this little word at the beginning, na. That's at the beginning of a lot of place names. And then the dahku. Let me make sure I get my right H's and glottal stops. Dahku. This is the part that means bumblebee. And the other one was Texas, which was originally from the word friend, which is teisha. Teisha, sorry. So there's a quick look at some of the sound patterns of the Caddo language. Now let's look at a little bit of grammar as most people think of grammar. That is, how do you put words together? How do you build up words and then build up phrases and sentences out of them? We're going to have to speed it up and just show a few examples. But let me just say that Caddo has an extremely complex what's called morphology. That is the system by which words are built up out of smaller pieces. An example of morphology in English would be the S that's used to mark the plural on a noun. So horse is the singular form, and horse plus this S morpheme, as it's called, makes a plural noun. So horse plus S equals horses. There are similar combinations in any language, and Caddo has lots of them. Let me just give you one interesting example here that has to do with verbs. I think we'll just talk about verbs. And let's start with commands, which are rather simple form. If you just want to tell some one person, tell them sing. I'll put an exclamation point to indicate that you're telling someone to do this. That comes out like this. .neo. Okay? And the part that really is the stem for singing is this right here. And this dot part occurs on the beginning of commands. But suppose you wanted to tell two people. So the meaning is the same, but this is what's called dual. It's referring to two people that you want to sing. You would say it this way. Dot we neo. So what happened? The neo part, as you can see, is just the same. The dot part is the same, but this thing has been added in the middle. And that's the part that means that you're talking to two people rather than one or three or more. If you were talking to three or more, that form is called plural. That's anywhere from three people on up. If you wanted to tell them to sing, you would do it this way. It's similar, but there's an extra little piece. You would say dot ne wa o. So look what happened here. The dot is the same as it was in the other two forms. The ne-o is here, but it's been split up by this thing that was stuck in the middle. You've probably heard of prefixes like the dot and suffixes like the S on horses in English. This is what's called an infix. It goes right in the middle of that verb root. So that's one of the interesting things about Caddo is it has this infix and other infixes as well. And you have to learn for each verb at what point you split. Is it na plus o or is it night plus o? No, it's ne plus o. If you need to put it in an infix, it goes right in there. So you need to learn for each verb which part is the preverb and which part is the verb root, the root proper within each verb root or stem. That's one of the really interesting things. How much time do we have left, Shirley? 2 minutes, my goodness. Let me see what else I can do. Let me just show you a basic present tense kind of verb form so you can see a couple of other prefixes and suffixes, and we may have to stop right there. It's really hard to force yourself to talk about a language in 30 minutes, but we do what we can. This is just to give you a taste. Let's stick with the same verb singing for simplicity, and let's take a couple of forms here, like hatsine osa. This means I am singing. Okay, I am singing. How do we know it means this? We have this little prefix and this little suffix, which together correspond to the ing. You could call them the progressive affixes. You take a prefix and a suffix and put the rest of the verb in the middle, and that means it's going to be I am singing, or he is singing, or we are singing, or something like that. It's kind of, in essence, it corresponds to this ing. This C means I have a first person subject. And because I don't have a dual marker here or a plural marker in here, we know that it's talking about I and not we. Let me look at two more forms of this. Let's look at the dual, in fact, and the plural. If you wanted to say, we are singing, meaning two of us, that would be what's called a dual form. And you would say, ha, tsit, ne osa. So, we two are singing. Whoops, that's a W. Everything else is the same, are singing. So what's changed here? Basically, this T is the part that makes it dual, and everything else here is the same. And you've got your root in the middle. Ne-o is the same in each of these. And then finally, if it was three of us singing, we would do it this way. Hatsi, ne wa osa. And here's where we're going to infix the plural form again, right here. And that also means we are singing, but this is 3 or more. This is the plural form. Hatsi ne wa osa. So here's the verb, ne o, but it's been split up by this infix, wa. So that's singular, dual, and plural in Caddo, and some of the features of the Caddo sound system. I had all kinds of things to tell you about semantics and whatnot, but they're telling me we have to wrap it up. So I hope this has given you some taste of what the Caddo language is like and made it abundantly clear that it's not some kind of primitive, simplistic, in any way defective system. It is so complex that even linguists often wonder how people ever grew up learning Caddo. There are so many rules I haven't even been able to give you a glimpse of yet. When you stick all these pieces together to form a word, the sounds change each other enormously. So we'll have to leave it there for tonight. And I hope this gives you some idea of the richness of the language and that you'll join us next time on Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone.